Hey everyone, so I decided to do my project on a brief history and analysis of both the Playfair and ADFGX ciphers. It's going to be more about the analysis. I'm going to do two examples, one of each cipher, and I have a little bit about the history as well, but again, it's going to be more about the analysis. Okay, so before I get into each cipher, I think it's important to go over what a Polybius square is, because both ciphers were inspired by the Polybius square, and the ADFGX cipher actually uses one. So a Polybius square is an ancient Greek encryption device, which is composed of a 5x5 grid, where each square of the grid is filled by a single letter, and there's a vertical column to the left of the alphabet and a row on top of it that acts as a coordinate system. That would be you can see it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as the top row and top column of both the Greek and English. Another thing to note is that it's a 5x5 grid, so there's 25 boxes in it, and there's 26 letters of the English alphabet. So when some people use the Polybius square in English, they will either not use one of the English letters and just not have it on the square at all because maybe their plain text doesn't have that letter in it. Or what I think the better way to do is you combine the I and J in the same box, just so you have all the letters. And I and J, if your message has both of them, they're easy to... you can intuitively figure out when to use the I and the J in your plain text, or when you're decoding it back to plain text. So it works by mapping every letter to a coordinate system. So just for an example, if your plain text is math, if we're looking at the English square on the bottom right, you can use the 3, you go by column and then row. So you would use the 3 in the column on the left, and then the 2 on the top row. And so M would be mapped to the 3, 2, then the A would be 1, 1, T would be 4, 4, and H would be 2, 3. So your ciphertext would be 3, 2, 1, 1, 4, 4, 2, 3. Okay. So the Playfair cipher, it was invented by Charles Wheatstone in 1854, but it was actually named after Baron Leon Playfair, who was just a nobleman that would promote its use, and he really liked it. It's considered to be the first DIGRAPH substitution cipher in cryptologic history, which I'm going to go over in the next slide. It was invented during World War I by the British forces, and it was also used in World War II, and it was used to encrypt and decrypt messages during both wars. Just a fun fact, Wheatstone proposed this to the British Undersecretary of Foreign Office, and at first he thought it might be too complex to teach the army, but Wheatstone actually went to a nearby elementary school and proceeded to teach 3 out of 4 students in that school how to both encrypt and decrypt using the cipher, which actually was evidence enough to convince the Undersecretary of Foreign Office that the British Army would be able to actively learn it. Okay, so a DIGRAPH substitution cipher. So a monoalphabetic substitution cipher is when a letter is just mapped to any other letter of the alphabet. And a good example of this would be the Caesar cipher, which I know we are all familiar with. Then a DIGRAPH substitution cipher is similar to a monoalphabetic cipher, but instead of mapping one letter to another letter, it would actually map a pair of letters to another pair of letters. Instead of one letter to one letter, it would be 2 letters to another 2 letters. In some cases, it could be more than 2 letters, but in the cases we're using, it's 2 letters to another 2 letters. So how the Playfair cipher works. So like the Polybius square, it's a 5x5 grid filled with the letters of the English alphabet, I and J sharing the same square. And you choose a keyword that has no repeating letters, and that's what you write in the first couple of boxes in the 5x5 grid. And then after that, you just fill in the rest of the alphabet without repeating any of the letters that your key has. So in order to encrypt your plaintext, you must first split every plaintext letter into pairs of 2s, and then when you apply these 2 letters to the grid, one of 3 things must be true. The letters will either be in the same row, the same column, or will form the opposite corners diagonally of a box. So if the 2 letters are in the same row, you write the letter to the right of each plaintext letter. If they're in the same column, you write the letter underneath each letter. And if they form the corners of the box, you write the letter to the left and the right corner of the plaintext letter. It's also important to note that if the messages end, if your plaintext ends with a lone letter, as in there's not another letter to pair with it, you would typically signify the end of the message with an X, and you can kind of choose any other letter you want as long as it's just not frequently used or confusing. Also, it's important to note that if there were double letters such as LL or SS, it's wise to switch that repeated letter with the same letter you ended the message with, or just another character, and inform whoever you're sending the message to that you're using an X to replace one of the double letters. To decrypt, all you do is, it's similar to how you encrypt it, except you move in the opposite direction. So if it's in the same row, you move it to the left. If it's in the same column, you move it up. And if it's in the same corner, you move it just to the other corner, left or right. So I'll go over an example now.
Okay. So for this example, the plain text, I'm going to use mission abort, which is one of the plain text for my first homework assignments. And for the key, I chose to use prime. So you can see in the square itself, the first, I put the key prime in P-R-I-I-N-J, share square, M-E, and I'm filling the rest of the square out with the rest of the alphabet. It doesn't have to be that way. You can make it as random as you want, as long as no letters repeat. Okay, so for the ciphertext, we're going to split each letter into groups of 2. Oh, and remember, SS, repeating character, I'm going to change this S to an X. Okay, so for MI, you find the M and the I, they're in the same row, and you take the letter to the right. So MI, M is going to be E, I is going to be M, SS is now going to be SX, so you find SX, it's in the same column, so S becomes X, X goes back here, becomes I, okay, and you get IO, I is here, O is here, this is a box, I'll highlight to make it easier to see. This is what I mean by the corner of each box. So I becomes P from here, and O becomes S. Okay, and now the rest of it turns out to GF. You just follow that process, and our ciphertext, it comes out to be EMXIPSGFAQMQ. And to get the plain text back, all you do again is you break the ciphertext into pairs of 2, and when you plug it back in, you get, this is actually going to be M-I or J, is the box. So here's what I was saying, since we have both I and J here, I think you can intuitively figure out that I's just make more sense in this context, and then that X is actually an S, because there's a double letter. If you're decoding it, the person that sent the message should have already told you that X would be replacing double letters, and you just get back to your plain text, which is mission abort.
Okay, so let's assume that you only have the ciphertext. So if you only have the ciphertext, a frequency attack would be a good attack approach, since the frequencies of English diagrams are known and published. When applying frequency analysis, we can take note of the most common diagrams used in the English language, which I found to be TH, HE, IN, AN, ER, or any other diagram on the list I put to the right. The frequency goes from most frequent to the bottom to least frequent on the top, but all of them on the list are used relatively frequently. So this information can be applied like this. ER and RE are both on that list in very common diagrams, and in my example with mission abort, FA and AF were common in the ciphertext. So a good guess would be that EF, R, and A would form the corners of a rectangle in the matrix, and you can keep looking at the diagrams and forming more rectangles to keep filling in the matrix. And another thing to keep in mind is that each plain text letter only has at most 5 possible corresponding ciphertext letters in the rows and columns, and also, unless the keyword is long, the last few rows of the matrix are predictable. Like in my matrix, I just filled it with the rest of the alphabet. So knowing all that, you can most likely piece together the matrix and come up with a way to find the plain text from the ciphertext. Okay, so ADFGX cipher. It was invented by German radio officer Fritz Nobel in 1918. The letters ADFGX were chosen because they sounded distinct from each other when transmitted via Morse code, and Fritz Nobel found them easy to remember. It is a fractioning transposition cipher combined with a POLYBIUS square, which I will, in the next slide, I'll say what a fractioning transpositioning cipher is. It's the predecessor of the ADFGVX cipher, which is a 6x6 grid. It allows for all 26 characters of the English alphabet, as well as all 10 digits. So the first person to crack it was Georges Pelevin, who was able to do so from multiple cribs from message interceptions. A crib is specific plaintext you're looking for from a predictable format. So it's like they intercept a lot of messages, and the messages either have a from and to at the start, or an end in the signature, or a sign off. And from those repeated occurrences, they were able to piece together parts of plaintext, or they had a good idea what some of the plaintext was from the ciphertext. Just a fun fact, in I don't know if any of you guys like to play Call of Duty, but in Call of Duty Black Ops 2, one of the creators, Jason Blundell, added an ADFGX cipher as an Easter egg in the Zombies game mode, and it took players a couple years to find out, and it gained a lot of popularity in that community. Okay, so fractioning transposition ciphers. A fractioning cipher is a method of encryption where each letter of the plaintext is represented by two or more symbols. So A can be represented by 0, 1, B by O2, so on. If you look at that list of plaintext, ciphertext, alphabet to the right of this fractioning cipher paragraph, you might get a better idea. And a transposition cipher is a method of encryption where the positions held by the letters of the plaintext are shifted according to a regular system in order to create a ciphertext. So it's basically, you have columns of text, and you rearrange the columns in a different order, would be what a transposition cipher would be. Okay, so how an ADFGX cipher works. It's similar to a Playfair cipher where it's still a 5x5 grid. You write a keyword, and then you fill out the rest of the grid with the rest of the letters of the alphabet, with I and J sharing the same square. But it also incorporates the row key and column key, like the POLYBIUS square, but instead of using a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it uses ADFGX. So when the plaintext is decided, it's broken up into its individual characters, and then each of those characters is mapped to the grid using the ADFGX from the column and the ADFGX from the row. Then another keyword is created. Again, it should not have any repeating letters, and columns are created for each letter of the keyword. These columns are then filled up left to right and then up to down with the coordinates from each of the letter of the plaintext. The letters of the keyword and each column under the letters are then arranged into alphabetical order. Then the ciphertext is created by writing down, again, left to right, up to down, the letters from this keywords row, the keywords columns in now alphabetical order. Then to decrypt, you arrange the ciphertext into these columns back into the alphabetical sorting of the keyword, rearrange it back into the keyword, and then you use those coordinates to find out what the plaintext was. I'm going to do an example and show you guys just really quick how it works.
Okay, so the example of the ADFGX cipher. So the first key we're going to use is prime, our second key is going to be math, and our plaintext, like the Playfair cipher, is going to be mission abort again. This time our square is going to be the key we're going to use for that is math, and then we're just going to fill out the rest of the alphabet similar to the Playfair cipher. Okay, so M is going to be mapped to AA because A is in the column, A in the row maps to M. FA is going to be FA. I, that's going to be the same for everything else, so GG would be S, and do that for every single letter of the plaintext. Okay, now after we get this, our plaintext written in coordinates, we use our second keyword, which I chose to be prime, and we write down all of the letters across in it. So left to right. Okay. And then, after we have all of these written, we put our key into alphabetical order, which would be R. And from these columns, we fill them out over here. I. And then this will give us our ciphertext if we just write these out. So our ciphertext would be this would be our ciphertext. And then to decrypt the ciphertext, you might be seeing that it might be hard if it's not divisible by your keyword and you have empty spaces, but if you know the keyword, it's easy to deduce that since E is at the end, it's going to be the shortest, and it's not going to have a character down there. So all you do is you just reverse it, and then you get the plain text back. Okay, so to get the ciphertext back to plain text, we make our keyword. It's already in alphabetical order, and I already started filling it out with the plain text. So a tricky part to getting it back to plain text is if the entire ciphertext isn't divisible by the amount of letters in your second key. So what happens is, since you know the order of our keyword, which is prime, which is P-R-I-M-E, you know that E is going to be one letter short because it's at the end of prime. So what you do is, with these last 4 letters, you skip over E. So E is blank, and then all you do is you just rearrange them back to how we mix them up. So you get P's column, you get R's column, I, then M, and then E. And all you do is you take all of these, read them left, right, up to down. You will get back to this, and all you have to do is match these with the coordinate system. So AA would be M, FA would be I, GG would be S, all the way until you get back to mission abort. And that is how the ADFGX cipher works.
Okay, and now for an attack approach when we just have access to the ciphertext. It's going to be similar to how Georges Paulonvin solved the ADFGX cipher. So let's suppose that we have 2 different ciphertexts intercepted around the same time, and the first several characters of the ciphertext are the same. Let's also say that the two plaintexts agree for the first several words, which means that the top few entries going left to right of the columns are also going to be the same for both ciphertexts. So a good next step would be to look through the ciphertext and find other places where the characters are the same, because they could possibly represent the beginnings of other columns. If we find matching characters, we now have a good idea of the column lengths. Then, using these lengths, we'd be able to assign the ciphertext into columns. Like the example I showed, the longer column should be near the beginning, and the shorter column should be near the end. And that's why the E in prime was 1 short, when the other ones were, the other ones were longer. If a column is long for both ciphertexts, is near the very beginning, and if it's long for one ciphertext and not the other, it goes in the middle. If it's short for both, it's near the end. Then, after we decided this, we can try various orderings of the columns, keeping the lengths in mind. Each ordering formed corresponds to a potential substitution cipher, and then using frequency analysis, we can try to solve them. If we solve correctly, one of those should give us the plaintext and the encryption matrix. Anyway, that was the ADFGX cipher and the Playfair cipher. I hope I explained it in a clear and concise way. Thank you for listening.